Okay, folks, in this video here, you just see this guy named Vlad Vexler. He's a Russian against Putin. I guess he grew up in Russia, and he's explaining why the left is so fond of. He said how the left, Putin's fooled the Western left. He's saying that the Eastern left don't have this problem. They're totally different. His argument is that they, like Putin, Russia is an imperial power just like the US. But it seems to me the US, the leftists just criticizes America, the US. And there's imperial powers. China is an imperial power. If we were against the left, is so against imperialism, why they only criticize their own country, U.S. And there's other imperial powers, and against they're anti-war. But I'm gonna let this play in you, and I'll make more comments after.
Anti-imperialist Western left is soft on Putin's extreme imperialist violence. We're talking titans of left intelligentsia, Noam Chomsky, Jeffrey Sachs, Cornel West, Richard Wolff. And we're also talking about the so-called alt-left, Glenn Greenwald, Aaron Mattei, Tulsi Gabbard, Matt Taibbi. All these...
Alt-left, I don't know if they really left or no. I don't understand this alt-left. What does that mean? They're not really, they're socialists. I don't think they're socialists. Or communists. They'd be the extreme left. I don't understand that term. In terms of those guys, Tulsi Gabbard, she's not even a progressive, actually. So.
Voices failed to get what Putin's politics is all about. They're skeptical of support in Ukraine, and they don't see how Russia's imperialist implosion threatens us in the West. We're going to lovingly expose their ideas, ask why they're misguided, and what the real-world consequences are. To understand how Putin fools the Western left.
Now, you're going to say that this guy is a shill for the neocons? And for the neocons in the U.S. government and all over. And he's a NATO leftist. And there's another term, NATO left. And they're gonna say I'm a shield for the U.S. or CIA. They probably never know. Well, my NATO leftist. Yeah. I'm just listen to this guy, open my eyes. I mean, you know what I mean? Open to facts, open to ideas. Not just listening to, one side. You could make a good argument, I listen to it. Yeah. And he makes, well, you'll see.
Over Ukraine, we have to turn back to the tumultuous months before the invasion. On 17 December 2021, Putin issued an ultimatum to the West, which made it clear that he thought that all of Eastern Europe should be his sphere of influence. A week later, he upped the ante at an annual press conference in Moscow.
We said not an inch to the east. That was the NATO guarantee in 1990. So what became of that? They fooled us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've witnessed 5 waves of NATO expansion. Why can't they understand? What is unclear? I believe everything is clear. We are thinking about our own security.
Putin concludes, we are not threatening anybody, so long as we get Eastern Europe back, and so long as the West makes amends for fooling us about not 1 inch of NATO expansion to the east. Whether that promise was really made, we'll come back to later.
Okay.
What Putin is really saying is, we resent the outside world for being mean to us. The United States runs everything, and we resent it. And we demand a new international order now. This was just the latest in a long line of Putin's increasingly radical statements on NATO. But to many, it felt like a key moment. Russia observers were beginning to feel that Putin might really be on the warpath.
Russian armor is massive.
Did he really say that? I don't know. I have to question what he said there. I don't know, but did he really said that in a speech or something? That's what he's saying. I don't know what he's really concerned about. I heard him say that he wants the old empire back. Old Russian Empire. But I don't think he meant the communists. He's talking way before that. The empire, that kind of empire. Where they had the czars. Because I heard that in the speech. But I don't know if he heard something like this. I don't know.
Near the border with Ukraine. At the same time, Moscow is demanding an end to NATO enlargement and NATO military activity in Eastern Europe.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is blaming the U.S. and NATO for worsening tensions in Eastern
He does not want a war, but he's demanding immediate guarantees from the U.S. and NATO.
But for many leftist thinkers, Putin's stated concerns about Russia's security were legitimate and needed to be taken at face value. And when they listened to Putin's incredible list of demands, they bought Putin's suggestion that what he was asking for wasn't that much.
Noam, a massive honour to have
Just a few months later, in May 2022, the famous philosopher, scientist and moralist Noam Chomsky went on leftist journalist Owen Jones's podcast and essentially blamed the war on American interventions.
The State Department officially stated that in the period up to the invasion, the U.S. refused to consider any Russian security concerns. Okay.
In Chomsky's view, Russia's security grievances caused by successive US administrations breaking that promise to not expand NATO 1 inch to the east were ignored, while Putin's stated goals in Ukraine, demilitarization, neutralization, were exaggerated by the US propaganda system to seem less legitimate than they were. Meanwhile, the US rode roughshod over Ukraine's desire for peace with its aggressive neighbor.
The record all the way through is
Isn't that
Ukraine seeking some kind of peaceful settlement, the U.S. refusing to accept it, and in fact moving there.
yeah, isn't that true though? Isn't Chomsky right? And what about the Minsk agreement? But we'll get to that after. But he doesn't mention this. Vlad Vexler, whatever. Yeah, he doesn't mention the agreement.
The opposite direction to undermine it, and Britain, of course, Blair's Britain politely shining Washington's shoes.
In this view, the war is largely a product of American actions imposed on Ukraine and Russia. Here is Jeffrey Sachs, the economist and public policy expert. Jeffrey says that the American neocon project of creating a unipolar American world, which is what led to NATO expanding right up to Russia's border, is in good part responsible for Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The explicit goal was to surround Russia in the Black Sea. President Putin came in. He was not anti-European. He was not anti-American. What he saw, though, was the incredible arrogance of the United States, the expansion of NATO, the wars in Iraq, the covert war in Syria, the war in Libya against the UN resolution. So we created so much of what we're facing right now through our own ineptitude and arrogance. There was no linear determination. It was step-by-step U.S. arrogance that has helped to bring us to where we are today.
That's the left. But what about the old left? The old left is
Isn't Sachs right though? Yeah.
sociologically different from the left, but it largely uses the same arguments. If the left is driven by traditional critiques of US imperialism, the old left is driven by participation in the culture wars and responsiveness to the crisis of trust in public institutions in the West. So it's here goes the evil American empire again versus our institutions are corrupt and we can't trust anything they do anymore. Here is Tulsi Gabbard.
It's the deep state. So that's what these guys focus on, the deep state. That's what these guys do. Greeno and well, her, I don't know if she.
So what we're seeing play out now is essentially a proxy war. U.S. is engaging in a proxy war with Russia, waging this war using the Ukrainian military and people as their chess pieces in this geopolitical chess game. The ultimate objective being regime change with Russia.
They're all arguing that since the war was America's to start and profit from, it is also America's to end. A key facet of the Western left's critique is that it is possible to off-ramp, that opportunities for peace have been missed and sabotaged, and that a solution is still available if we pursue negotiations and diplomacy. Here is economist and public intellectual Richard Wolff.
My conclusion, and that of many around the world: stop it. End this war, sit down the two sides, work out an acceptable agreement. Anything is safer and better for the world than...
Yeah, I agree. You don't think he's right though, Vladdy? They should sit down and negotiate, whatever. Negotiate peace. Nobody wants a war, especially a nuclear war, right?
Continuing down the unknowable, dangerous path that we are now on.
And here is Chomsky again.
Possibly there's one way to bring the agony to an end quickly. That's negotiations and diplomacy. There's no other way. That means, in this case, offering Putin some kind of escape hatch, some way to get out without admitting total defeat. That's diplomacy. Well, if you reject it, you're carrying out a grotesque experiment, gambling with the lives of Ukrainians, and in fact the world. And that's the experiment that the US and Britain are undertaking.
Chomsky has roots in Ukraine. His father was born there, and he is a significant intellectual outside the realm of politics. And some of the other people, maybe people you admire, you have a relationship with, but they are not right. First, most centrally, they are misreading why Putin invaded Ukraine. And because they are misreading
Okay, let's see.
Why the war began, they're unable to understand the ongoing dynamics driving the conflict. So let's go back to Putin's December 2021 ultimatum and the causes of the war. Everything we've seen from the left and from the old left tends to capture the causes of the war in terms of Russia's national security as expressed in Putin's ultimatum. But in reality, it's a lot more complex than that. There are two primary explanatory pillars driving the causation of the war, and actually neither of them can be mapped onto NATO expansion. Let's start with the first pillar, regime security. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2014 and the full-scale invasion in 2022 were done in good part to avert regime erosion at home. In the pre-2022 world, Putin was playing president by outsourcing his presidential powers to his court and then arbitrating, refereeing conflicts within his court. And at one point he felt that his refereeing powers had shrunk. And to gain them back, he thought he needed war. There is another factor.
So maybe, okay, he did this. So he's saying that he's doing this because to gain power. Because one day he might be overthrown. He's gonna lose power. And there was a coup against him not too long ago. So he did this because to regain, stay in power in a sense. Oh, it's interesting.
Putin felt that the younger generation was drifting away from him, and he could put a lid on top of them via a war. Putin hoped, and he still does, that a big conflict against the West, a militarization of Russian society, will allow him to skip a generation, bringing it about that today's Russian children grow up to become Putin supporters. The second pillar of the explanation for war is about...
That's a good point. That's a great point. You might agree with that.
National security, kind of, but not in the way our leftist heroes would have us believe. Putin's conception of national security is both more radical and more mystical than their understanding allows. Between 2010 and 2014, Putin developed a sense of mission, and Putin, the amateur historian, began making self-aggrandizing ventures into the past, looking for role models for himself. And he came to think, perhaps Alexander III, that he was special. He got the feeling that Russia's cultural destiny...
So that's what he wants. That's like the other old empire. That's what he fashions himself after.
...is now tied to the will of a single individual, Mr. Putin. This sense of mission came years after the 2007 speech at the Munich Security Conference. There, Putin too wanted to reject the post-Cold War European settlement, but his later rejection of it took on a more mystical quality. The left, and to be fair, many in the West, deal with the Putin regime as though it were Brezhnev, whereas in fact it is closer to being something like a radical terror organization, invoking holy values to justify violence. But here we have to concede a point and allow nuance. NATO expansion was handled badly, and Western leaders like Bill Clinton knew that when they were doing it. Before we tackle this, let's
exactly
clarify the infamous not 1 inch to the east promise. Was there a promise? Promises were made repeatedly, but they weren't formalized. So here is my analysis. A politician can promise another politician something by saying it, but a state cannot promise another state something without formalizing it on paper. And when we look at the formality, we see that the Kremlin signed a treaty explicitly allowing the expansion of Article 5 eastward. When Putin says that Russia got fooled, he is half right.
So they signed a treaty. Let's go back at this. Let's go back a little bit.
The formality, we see that the Kremlin signed a treaty explicitly allowing the expansion of Article 5 eastward. When Putin...
Why would they do that though? Okay, it says, oh wow, it's in writing. Yeah, they were fooled. Wow. That was a big mistake. Wow. Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, they got fooled, alright.
It says that Russia...
And that's Gorbachev.
Got fooled, he is half right. Mr. Gorbachev got fooled because he was an extraordinary leader and a poor negotiator.
Wow.
But the Soviet Union, being a state, didn't get fooled because states don't make promises to each other that aren't on paper. And what then followed was that the East European...
I understand that. Wasn't the leader of the state itself? Yeah, I think you're wrong there. I don't know. I don't understand that. I think he got fooled. But they tricked him into signing so in a way, it's their own fault they get tricked into it. I mean, well, I think the agreement was, no, that's something else. I'm thinking about we have to deal with Ukraine, but no, that's another agreement.
Countries wanted to run away from Moscow and join their own security alliance. Because when Russia invaded Ukraine and nearly took Kiev in 2022, this wasn't the first time. There was Budapest in 56, there's Prague in 68, and there is Poland in 81, when there weren't Russian tanks in Warsaw, but there were Polish tanks ordered from Moscow. But as Mary Surratt argues in her path-breaking book, the problem wasn't that NATO expanded, the problem was how NATO expanded.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
For example, there was a possibility of a more rapid but more diffuse expansion, which is what Clinton wanted, partly because it will avoid creating a line by leaving Ukraine on an end. Either way, as Mary Surratt argues, nothing was more conducive to radicalizing Russia than expanding NATO in small tranches.
Yep.
But while this
so you see that made it worse. The incremental expansion, rather if you expanded like more countries at once, I mean, a wider expansion but shorter. In that time, maybe it wouldn't have been. They wouldn't have. That's what he's saying. They would have rejected it. Like the Russians, when they rejected it.
Radicalized Russia, NATO expansion is not a primary cause of war. Centering it doesn't account for the domestic regime security causes of war. And as we have seen, reducing Putin's sense of mission to grievances about NATO expansion over-instrumentalizes his worldview. We are not looking at a guy who wants to alter a couple of moves on a board game. We're looking at a guy who wants to take the board game and throw it off the table. And there is something else that the NATO expansion did it argument implies, and that is that Putin's imperialistic death spiral serves Russia's national interest. But any thinking Russian should know that Putin's actions are destroying Russia's future and increasing the odds that Russia may not exist at all.
Wow.
And that
hear that? Wow.
There's an even more striking omission in that argument, and that is Ukrainian agency. Since 2014, Ukraine has come together in a civic bond powered by anti-colonial sentiment. And it's only an ungrounded newspaper clipping approach to political understanding that could lead Noam Chomsky to say that Ukraine wants peace more than weapons.
They do.
Likewise, both Putin's sense of regime security and his sense of mission are not compatible with an off-ramp. My interpretation is that Putin wants a big war against the West, but in several years from now. Meanwhile, he wants a low-level, minimally globalized war, during which Western support for Ukraine exhausts itself and Western democracies begin to collapse. And then Putin can act from a position.
Wow. So he says Putin wants a war of attrition. He wants a slow, muddled war. So people get discouraged. And he wants the support for the war, support for Ukraine gets people get frustrated. And if the support goes, the countries will stop supporting Ukraine. That means you could really do a more invasion, do more like expand it. I mean, maybe he's going to expand it. You could even expand the war, create a greater war. That's what he's saying. That's interesting.
Position of strength. The left's strongest case is the risk of global nuclear Armageddon.
Exactly. Who wants a nuclear war?
A nuclear war could break out in a week, in 30 days, we are staring over the precipice of that nuclear brink now more than ever before. It would spark World War III, and the result of that is destruction of the world.
My own assessment is that Russia indeed poses a high global nuclear risk. This is the left's strongest argument, but I have a couple of responses. One, the Biden administration has been extremely conservative at nuclear escalation management. That is why we've seen, with each new weapon given to Ukraine, first a toe in the door, then 2 toes, then 3, and then eventually a small quantity of weapons is delivered. Second, Ukraine retaking Crimea would increase global nuclear risk. But Ukraine...
And how was that?
Not retaking Crimea, Ukraine not retaking its territories, Ukraine, God forbid, losing Kiev, which is currently impossible, would actually lead to massive Russian escalation and high nuclear risk.
How's that?
However we weigh nuclear risk, we are exchanging.
I don't understand that. You didn't really explain that. How that I mean, if they... Yeah, okay, if they give up Kiev, yeah. But say if they ended in just Crimea, and see if they ended right now, and there's a settlement, and Russia takes Crimea and another part of Ukraine, actually. There's an agreement, in the Minsk agreement. I mean, so he doesn't mention the Minsk agreement. So it could end this, so it wouldn't happen, there wouldn't be no invasion. But he's saying that it wouldn't be an invasion already. But there's an agreement that the Russia agreed to. So he doesn't mention this. I don't know. Doesn't mention the Minsk agreement. So I don't know. Now I'm thinking now, I don't know. I should believe this guy. I mean, I'm sure the left is too much towards Russia. Even the right now. I think both parties, the left and the right, too much. I mean, but now you're seeing that, because of the right's because of Donald Trump. But the left has been always against imperialism, especially U.S. imperialism. So that's why the left is always skeptical of the U.S. And that's why the left is like this. So maybe they're easily fooled. But both are imperial powers. And they should be looked at the same way. So he's right. That's the only argument with this guy. Some of the stuff he's saying, I don't know. Because
nuclear risk today for nuclear risk tomorrow. There is no nuclear risk-free way of standing up to Putin's imperialistic aggression. And now we're getting to the elephant in the room.
Wow. So it says either way you could have nuclear war. So he's saying either, see if you back down, or if, I don't know, if you back down, you could have a nuclear war. So he's saying if there's a peace, so there won't be there's a chance if there's a peace agreement. I don't understand. You can have nuclear war still. Why are you saying that there won't be any peace agreement? And if he gets what he wants, or he's saying he gets what he wants, if he takes over Ukraine, he's gonna want to take over Poland or another country, a NATO country. In that sense. Poland or Sweden, say for instance Sweden. So there will be either way they build a nuclear. It's going to be a nuclear war. That's what he's saying, which is not. It's just scary. No, I don't know. This is not good.
We need to zoom out and look at the left's relation.
Let me see this.
Nuclear risk-free way
Let's see what he says here. Let's go
is
back.
why we've seen, with each new weapon given to Ukraine, first a toe in the door, then 2 toes, then 3, and then eventually a small quantity of weapons is delivered. Second, Ukraine retaking Crimea would increase global nuclear risk. But Ukraine not retaking Crimea, Ukraine not retaking its territories, Ukraine, God forbid, losing Kiev, which is currently impossible, would actually lead to massive Russian escalation and high nuclear risk. However we weigh nuclear risk, we are exchanging nuclear risk today for nuclear risk tomorrow. There is no nuclear risk-free way of standing up to Putin.
So eventually, if he takes Kiev, it's going to be, doesn't matter, he's going to keep on going. And eventually it's going to be a nuclear war. That's what he's saying. See if they take Ukraine, give them the Ukraine, or they have an agreement, they're going to, eventually it's going to be nuclear war anyways, down the road. So I don't know. Well,
imperialistic aggression. And now we're getting to the elephant in the room. We need to zoom out and look at the left's relationship with America. Here is the humanist public intellectual and presidential candidate Cornel West causally centering American imperialism in America.
This is fake US-centric anti-president. Why do you call it fake? Fake US-centric.
Here is the humanist public intellectual and presidential candidate Cornel West causally centering American imperialism in the run-up to the war.
NATO is an instrument of American imperial foreign policy. We've seen it over and over again, and so we're witnessing a proxy war.
They view all US action abroad as imperialist, and in some cases as a product of US corporate capitalism. Their views are profoundly US-centric. They think two things. First, imperialism is always bad. Second, their working, implicit definition of imperialism is American-centric. Imperialism just is what America does abroad. Paradoxically, their US-centric anti-imperialism blinds them to the horrors of Russian imperialism. And it also blinds them to the constructiveness of US power in Ukraine. What they miss about imperialism, if we call the United States an empire, is that not all empires are equally bad. And some global problems cannot be solved without the projection of imperial power. US imperial power is the only vehicle for stopping Mr. Putin's aggression. The truth is that the US...
Yeah, I think you're wrong. All imperial powers and imperialism is bad anyways. I disagree. I mean, so you want America to be the policeman of the world. That's what he's saying. I think imperialism itself is bad. So yes, you're wrong, dude. Nonsense. I think both are bad. Both powers are bad. And imperialism itself is bad. I mean, so the US should be the policeman of the world, and go in and knock off the bad guys. I don't believe in isolationists. I think US should be just other countries working with countries, try and do good in the world, help their allies, even help their enemies. I mean, help each other. Partnership. But I don't believe in, it should not be an empire. That's what, I think this guy's wrong. He's wrong about this. He's right about the main problem is, he's right, the left, too much on the side of Russia, and the right wing too. I think both are bad. Both empires are bad. I think empires in general are bad. I mean, they enslave people. They destroy cultures and enslave people. And you have colonialism. Well, it comes from empires usually that they go into they go colonize Well, back in the early part, 15th century or before that, to colonize other countries, other territories, and then that's colonialism. So the empires usually do the colonialistic to me in that way. So they're like, so they're actually colonialism. You know what I mean? In a way. So they're both bad. I think these guys are.
Empire is good and bad. And we need it to be good. And it is good now in Ukraine. While Russian imperialism is, as we have seen, irredeemably nihilistic and caught up in a destructive and self-destructive death spiral.
There should be no empires.
Line is that in denying the agency of other countries, in over-exaggerating America's indeed pervasive hand in everything, the leftist heroes of our video end up paying US imperialism a compliment in reverse. In lampooning American power in such a reductionist way, no, Chomsky and our other heroes fall into the very American centrism they're trying to critique. But that's not a reason to cancel them. So what do we have to say in defense of those we have critiqued? First, many on the left do not share the mistakes of the heroes of this video. Ask a Polish or a Ukrainian leftist about the realities of Mr. Putin's imperialism, and they'll tell you what's up with it. Second, it would be unhealthy to have nobody in the position that is always opposed to all US war making. If you support Ukraine, your opponents on the soft on Putin Western left could be your allies another day. 3. The alt-left's warning about collapsing trust in our institutions is valid. And it's healthy if they remind us that, in principle, a correct policy abroad could become wrong if it destabilizes democracy at home. 4. We share a table of politics, and we don't get to win an argument by declaring that we've won it. That said, the left's poor analysis costs. It costs us, it costs our democracy, it costs Ukraine, it costs Eastern Europe, and it even costs Russia. It would be a catastrophe for Eastern Europe and for the West if a part of Eastern Europe were lost to a tyrant sitting atop an imploding empire. Putin threatens our national security, not just Ukraine's, and we need to plan and strategize accordingly. Now, an obvious question coming out of all this is, how on earth did Russia end up in this disastrous place? To understand the cultural and historical journey that got Russia here, watch this video.
No, I'm not going to watch that video, but maybe I'll do that video too, but yeah, so the part that he said imperialism is good and bad imperialists. No, none of them are bad. There shouldn't be any empires. Empire is the old thing. Now this is 2023, there shouldn't be any empires. But I have sympathy though. People with Eastern Europeans are leftists. So I think I understand their fear of Putin. And you're right. But I think all empires are bad. I think it's just in the US. I think he has a point that the US, the leftists, they're too much. They always only point out the US. There's another guy that does that, Julius Assange too. He's another one. He's part of the. You never mentioned Julius Assange. He's part of the alt left. Alt left. That's a weird term to me. So I don't think they're really left. They're not really leftists, anyways. So there's some kind of like Gabbard and Glenn Greenwald. It's more of a libertarian. But anyways, folks, what do you think of this? Give me a comment if you want. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. Give me a comment. I'm gonna be like a Putin, not a Putin. Oh, I'm doing the proper Russiagate. I'm doing Russiagate, folks. That's what the leftists are gonna say, and the right wing. It's Russiagate. I'm doing. I'm MSNBC. Anyways, folks, what do you think of this? I'm out.